You brought her here? To my father's lodge? My husband did not even blink. He stood beneath the carved wooden entrance of the place my father spent 27 years building, one hand resting casually on another woman's waist, and said, "Amina, stop acting like this belongs to you alone." He said it loudly, too, loud enough for the kitchen staff to freeze, loud enough for the groundskeeper to stop lowering the gate chain, loud enough for the driver by the gravel road to stop unloading bags, and loud enough for the woman beside him, wearing my dead mother's silk scarf around her neck, to smile like she had already won. That was the moment I stopped trying to save my marriage. Because betrayal hurts, yes, but there is a special kind of cruelty in watching a man bring his mistress into the one place your father built with his own hands, and then tell you not to make a scene. What David did not know was this: the safari lodge behind him was never the real inheritance. The land beneath every suite, every water line, every staff quarter, every jeep track, and every permit that made that business valuable had been protected long before he ever married me. And by the time the sun set that evening, he would learn something important. Some women cry first, and some women lock the gate. Before I continue, tell me where you're watching from. And if you've ever been too kind to someone who mistook your silence for weakness, stay with me. Because what happened at my father's lodge did not just end my marriage. It exposed a kind of greed so shameless that even the men helping my husband carry in furniture looked embarrassed by the end of it. My name is Amina Njoroge. I'm 43 years old, and before marriage turned me into a woman who kept explaining herself inside her own home, I was simply my father's daughter. The lodge sat on the edge of a protected wildlife corridor 3 hours outside Nairobi. In dry season, the grass turned gold. In the rains, everything went green. Zebra crossed the lower field at dawn, and my father used to say you could hear the truth better out there, because the city was too far away to interrupt it. Its name was Nuru Ridge. My father chose that name because he believed light does not always fall from heaven. Sometimes it comes from what a family builds when nobody is watching. He started with 4 cottages and 1 old Land Cruiser that coughed more than it drove. He cooked with staff, changed sheets himself, fixed pipes at midnight, and argued with suppliers in town over every wasted shilling. My mother kept the books on a wooden desk by the pantry and welcomed every guest like family. By 14, I could fold napkins, track inventory, and greet exhausted travelers with tea before they asked. By 20, I knew which pump failed after heavy rain, which contractor overcharged, which ranger to call if elephants strayed too near the fence, and how to smile through exhaustion without turning sacrifice into theater. That lodge was never just property. It was my father's life written in timber, dust, stone, and discipline. And David hated that from the beginning. Not openly. Men like David do not begin with open hatred. They begin with charm. They study what matters to you, then stand close enough to it that you confuse access with love. I met him at a hospitality investment conference in Nairobi when I was 29. He was polished in the way that makes people sit up straighter around them. Tailored jacket, soft, expensive voice, confident handshake. He worked in luxury development consulting and loved saying things like investor placement, land partnerships, and premium repositioning, as if greed sounded better in a blazer. At the time, I was helping run Nuru Ridge while my father's health was starting to decline. I knew occupancy rates, supplier margins, staffing cycles, permits, all of it. David told me he found that impressive. "You don't sound like the owner's daughter," he said over coffee. "What am I supposed to sound like?" I asked. Entitled, he said with a smile. You sound like you earned every brick. I should have known then that he was studying the bricks. In the beginning, he admired everything he later tried to destroy. My discipline, my loyalty, my devotion to family, my refusal to turn every beautiful place into a billionaire's playground. He called me grounded, steady, rare. Then we got married, and those same qualities became problems. Grounded became stubborn. Steady became boring. Protective became emotional. And family legacy became, in his words, dead capital waiting for modern leadership. My father never liked him. He never raised his voice about it. He simply watched. My father believed grown people reveal themselves faster when nobody performs outrage around them. One evening, 6 months before the wedding, we stood on the lodge deck, watching the sunset burn across the plains, while David was inside, talking too loudly on the phone about valuations and expansion potential. My father said, "Amina, there are people who enter a home and see the people inside it." Then he paused. "And there are people who enter a home and begin calculating what can be removed." I laughed then. Daughters in love are often the last to understand warnings that do not sound like commands. "He loves me," I said. My father nodded. "Maybe, but that is not always enough protection from a man's appetite." I did not understand that fully until much later. The first years of marriage, David was careful. He carried my mother's serving dishes without being asked, called my father Baban Joroge in that respectful tone men use when they want acceptance into systems they do not control. He was kind to staff when I was in the room. Then effort faded, and truth stepped in. My father died in late August after hiding how sick he really was. By the time the doctor finally said liver, it was already a sentence. 3 weeks after the funeral, David came to me with an expansion proposal. I was at the reception desk answering condolence messages when he dropped the folder in front of me. "A real plan," he said. "Practical." It included luxury-tented suites, a helipad, spa, infinity pool, foreign investors, brand repositioning. My father had been dead 22 days. I closed the folder. "No. You haven't even read it." "I don't need to." He exhaled like I was embarrassing him. "You run important decisions through sentiment first and logic second." I looked at him and saw something shift. My grief had already become inconvenience to him. My father is not even a month in the ground. And the world doesn't pause because we're sad. That sentence did not end my marriage, but it ended the part where I still felt emotionally safe inside it. After my father died, Nuru Ridge became more than a business. It became the last place where both my parents still felt present. My mother's handwriting was still on pantry labels. My father's field journal still sat above the office safe. The fig tree he planted near Cottage 3 still leaned slightly because, as he used to say, it needed character. David saw all of it as clutter around an asset. And because he was not cruel every day, because his contempt came wrapped in calm, I kept making excuses. That is the trap. If someone is terrible all the time, leaving is easier. But when disrespect arrives in measured doses, you start rationing your self-respect just to make the marriage make sense. By year 8, the pattern was clear. He pressured. I resisted. He called me emotional. I over-explained. He withdrew affection, then gave just enough back to keep the whole thing from collapsing. The first time I heard the name Zuri, I didn't know she would become part of the story. She was a branding consultant at David's firm. Young, magnetic, sharp. The kind of woman who looked fully aware of every eye in the room and never once doubted her effect. David mentioned her too often. Zuri understands premium storytelling. Zuri says East African hospitality is under-monetized. Zuri has vision. One night over dinner, I asked, "Do I not have vision?" He smirked. "You have attachment. That's different." A few weeks later, I met her at an event. Ivory silk, gold earrings, a smile too relaxed for a woman standing where she did. "I've heard so much about Nuru Ridge," she said. "Only good things, I hope." She glanced toward David. "Important things." Women do not need full confessions to recognize danger. Sometimes one word arrives wearing perfume. That night, I asked David if something was going on between them. He laughed. Not because it was absurd, because he liked being in a position to deny it. "You're jealous of a consultant?" "I'm asking. And I'm telling you not to embarrass yourself with insecurity." There was no reassurance in that, no concern, just superiority. The affair revealed itself the way most betrayals do, not in one dramatic moment, but in patterns. Late calls, a phone turned face down, irritation when I entered rooms, explanations arriving too fast, smiles sent elsewhere. Then, one Saturday, he said he needed to stop by the office for a file. His car wasn't there. Zuri's was. I waited in the underground garage for 17 minutes. When they came down together, laughing, his hand rested at the small of her back with the ease of a man who had stopped fearing consequences. I did not confront him there. Public chaos rewards shameless people. I went home and waited. He walked in after 11, holding takeout from a restaurant we both liked, which told me everything. Innocent men do not shop for apology before they enter the house. "Long night," he said. "With Zuri?" He froze for half a second. Half a second is enough. "How long?" I asked. "It happened because you've been impossible to reach." "Say it plainly." He sat down like honesty was an administrative burden. "There's something between us." "Between us?" I said. "You're talking about your mistress like this is poetry." "You've been married to this lodge, your grief, your father's ghost, everything except me. My parents are not why you cheated." "No," he said coldly. "But they are why you never became the woman I needed." That night, I cried in the guest room like someone grieving a death that happened indoors. The next morning, he acted like the world should keep functioning because he had finished confessing. That was when I called a lawyer. Her name was Wanjiku Muthoni. My father had used her years ago during a land dispute. She was elegant, exact, and terrifying in the calm way only truly competent people are. I expected divorce strategy. I did not expect inheritance revelation. After listening to everything, she asked me one question. "Did your husband ever sign anything involving the land title, trust, or management rights?" "Trust?" She stared at me. "You do know Nuru Ridge is not held in ordinary personal title." I did not. That afternoon I opened a cedar chest my father had left and found old deeds, permits, company papers, and one sealed envelope labeled in his handwriting, "For Amina, if protection becomes necessary." Inside was a letter, a trust summary, and instructions for Wanjiku. My father had separated the lodge business from the land years earlier. The buildings, vehicles, staff, and bookings ran through Nuru Ridge Hospitality Limited. But the actual land, the ridge, the boreholes, access roads, staff housing strip, lower corridor, and the conservation use rights were held in the Njoroge Family Land Trust. I was sole trustee, sole controlling beneficiary, sole signatory for any lease, development, occupancy extension, capital conversion, or transfer tied to that land. No spouse could claim control through marriage. No investor deal could move without my written consent. And any unauthorized occupation by someone claiming family access could legally be treated as trespass. Then I read my father's letter. My daughter, if you are reading this, someone has mistaken your gentleness for surrender. The lodge can be managed by many people. The land cannot. I place the bones of this place where only discipline may reach them. If anyone ever stands in your doorway and tries to make you feel small in the home your mother and I built, remember this. A person may marry you and still never earn the right to your foundations. I sat on that floor and cried until my chest hurt. Not because I was broken, because even from the grave, my father had seen the storm before I knew its name. The divorce began 2 weeks later. David filed first, claimed emotional incompatibility, suggested I had become unstable after my father's death, requested access to certain shared hospitality assets pending division. Shared. Wanjiku looked up from the papers and said, "He's testing language, and probably access." Then, one Tuesday afternoon, while I was in Nairobi, Mzee Otieno, the lodge groundskeeper who had been with us for nearly 20 years, called me. "Madam Amina," he said, voice tight, "your husband is here." "At the lodge?" "Yes, with that lady, and his mother. Movers, too. They are bringing in chairs, boxes, wine crates, decorations." My blood went cold. He says he has every right to use the place while the divorce is pending. The drive back took 3 hours and 13 minutes. By the time I turned onto the gravel road, something inside me had gone quiet. Not calm. Clean. The gate was open. David's SUV was parked near reception. Zuri's car beside it. Movers were carrying furniture through the lobby. Then I saw her. Zuri. Standing on my parents' deck in my mother's silk scarf, drinking tamarind juice from the blue tray set my parents used on anniversary dinners. And beside her sat my mother-in-law, Beatrice, in one of my father's cane chairs, like marriage had finally delivered the kingdom she thought her son deserved. David turned when I slammed the car door. "Amina," he said smoothly, "you're overreacting already." I walked toward the movers first. "Put everything down." They hesitated. David gave a short laugh. "You don't give orders here like that anymore." I looked at him. "You brought your mistress into my father's lodge. Stop using words that create drama in front of staff." Zuri crossed her legs. "I think she enjoys public scenes." I turned to her. "Take off my mother's scarf." Her hand flew to it. David stepped forward. "Don't speak to her like that." Then Beatrice stood up and adjusted her sunglasses. "Really, Amina, if your marriage is ending, at least maintain some dignity. David deserves peace somewhere." I looked at the chair she stood beside. "That chair was bought by my father before your son even knew this place existed." She smiled thinly. And now your father is gone, dear. Life moves. Something ended in me right there. I turned to David. Get everybody out. He folded his arms. No. You think you can occupy this place and turn it into leverage? We are still married, he said. This property has functioned as a shared marital hospitality asset for years. I have every right to be here. And if you keep acting like this, you only strengthen my case that you're unstable. There it was. The plan. Not just infidelity, positioning. He wanted presence, optics, implied use, narrative. Something he could later translate into entitlement. He had not just brought a mistress, he had brought strategy. I stepped past him. He grabbed my wrist, not hard enough to bruise, but hard enough for everyone to see. Mzee Otieno moved instantly. Remove your hand, he said. David snapped. This is between my wife and me. No, I said quietly. It isn't. I walked into my father's office, locked the door, and called Wanjiku. He's here, I said, with the mistress and his mother. Good, she replied. Now listen carefully. I opened the safe. Inside were backup trust documents, access revocation forms, title maps, and a note in my father's handwriting. If pressure comes dressed as family, treat it like pressure. Wanjiku told me exactly what to do. Activate trust authority. Revoke access. Call county administration and police support. Record names, vehicles, everything. Do not argue. Do not explain. Just act. So I did. I changed the suite locks, deactivated old gate remotes, reset service codes, shut down compound access. David came inside while I was at the console. What are you doing? Protecting my property. You're being ridiculous. No, I said. You were ridiculous when you drove your mistress through my gate. He smiled, but it had changed. There was uncertainty in it now. You said this place belonged to our marriage, I told him. That was your mistake. The business may have hosted you. The land never did. For the first time, he looked unsettled. What does that mean? It means you should have cheated on someone whose father was less careful. Then I went outside and addressed the movers. You have 15 minutes to remove every item you brought in. If not, your names go into an unauthorized occupation report. And trust me, this family is not worth that paperwork. They looked at David, then at me, then quietly started carrying boxes back out. At 5:12 p.m., the police arrived with a county lands officer. Wanjiku had already alerted them. David tried immediately. This is a domestic disagreement. My wife is emotional. The officer held up a hand. Sir, do you have written occupancy authorization from the controlling trust authority? David stopped. I'm her husband. That was not the question. Wanjiku arrived 20 minutes later with a leather folder and the calm of a woman who enjoys watching paperwork humble arrogant men. She presented the trust summary, title maps, access control clauses, and occupancy restrictions. Sole trustee, Amina Njoroge. No spousal rights by implication. No use rights without authorization. Unauthorized occupation may be treated as trespass. Beatrice looked offended. Zuri looked confused. David looked like a man discovering that the woman he thought he was humiliating had inherited not just memory, but structure. He pulled me aside. You set this up? My father did. You're making me look like a fool. I met his eyes. No, David. You drove yourself here. The officers instructed them to remove everything immediately. No further access without written approval. Any forced re-entry would trigger criminal trespass procedures. By sunset, the furniture was gone. The wine crates were gone. Zuri had taken off my mother's scarf. Beatrice was muttering on the phone to relatives who had fed themselves for years on one-sided versions of my marriage. And David stood at the bottom of the steps, looking up at me like he could not understand how the same woman who once over-explained dinner plans had become someone capable of standing silent while he was publicly corrected. "You'll regret this," he said. I shook my head. "No, I regret giving you a key." That was the line that finished him. Not because it was loud, because it was true. The gates closed behind them at 6:04 p.m. For the first time in years, Nauru Ridge could breathe again. I cried later that night in my mother's old linen room. Not graceful tears, the kind that leave your back aching. Mzee Otieno did not interrupt me. He just placed tea outside the door and said, "Your father would have opened the gate for a guest. He would have locked it for a thief." 3 days later, Wanjiku brought me disclosure documents tied to David's firm. That was when I learned the full truth. He had not brought Zuri to the lodge just for romance. He had been pitching a luxury conservation resort deal to foreign investors. And Nauru Ridge was central to it. Not the buildings, the land, the access roads, the water, the wildlife corridor approvals, the lower ridge easement connecting 2 parcels his group wanted to consolidate. Without my signature, the project weakened. He had wanted to normalize use before forcing negotiations. Use becomes narrative. Narrative becomes pressure. Pressure becomes compromise. That was the real betrayal. He had tried to turn my grief into an entry strategy. After that, I stopped reading his behavior as heartbreak and started reading it as appetite. I went through every file my father left behind. Water agreements, community transit notes, grazing protections, conservation restrictions, emergency road access. I realized he had not just built a lodge. He had built a defense system disguised as legacy. The public hearing came in September. David's firm presented glossy boards, drone shots, luxury villa renderings, polished forecasts. Zuri clicked through slides like nothing had happened. David spoke about growth, eco-luxury, regional development, and opportunity. He made appetite sound like service. Then local comments opened. A guide spoke about community access. A widow from a nearby settlement spoke about water dependency. Mzee Otieno spoke about memory, stewardship, and what happens when people who did not build a place start talking like they discovered it. Then I stood. "My name is Amina Njoroge," I said. "I am the sole trustee of the Njoroge Family Land Trust, and the daughter of the man who built Nauru Ridge from 4 cottages, 1 broken vehicle, and a work ethic some of us should be ashamed to speak over." The room went still. "This proposal is being sold as progress. But progress for who? For families who lose access? For workers turned decorative in their own region? For a wildlife corridor squeezed by luxury? For history erased so a brochure can sound modern?" Then I opened the trust file. For the record, the Njoroge Family Land Trust does not consent to any access, route consolidation, water extension, lease conversion, branding merger, occupancy normalization, or investor-backed integration tied to this project. And then I looked directly at David. You cannot sleep your way into a family's inheritance. You cannot marry your way into a legacy you never respected. And you cannot call greed development just because the presentation is expensive. Nobody gasped. Real consequences are quieter than movies. But I watched faces change. Investors started rereading their papers. County officers whispered. Zuri stopped touching the tablet. And David finally saw that he had mistaken my restraint for incapacity. Within weeks, one investor withdrew. Then another hesitated. Environmental review slowed. A regional paper picked up the story. Former guests called. Community members showed support. Even some of David's colleagues began distancing themselves. Because in certain circles, cheating is survivable. Miscalculation is not. He came to the gate one last time in November, alone. The security alert hit my phone first. Museo Tieno asked if I wanted him turned away. No, I said. I'll go. I walked down the gravel path slowly, wanting to feel every step between the woman I used to be and the one now meeting him at the gate. He looked older. Not in years, in consequence. I lost the final investor group, he said. I said nothing. The board moved me off the project. Still nothing. Then he offered what I think he believed was an apology. I didn't think you would fight like this. I nodded. That was your first mistake. He looked down, then back up. Is there any way to reconsider limited cooperation under new terms? Even then, after everything, he still spoke the language of access. Do you hear yourself? I asked. This doesn't have to end like this. It ended the day you brought another woman through my gate. He tightened his grip on the bars. It was never just about her. I know, I said. That's what made it uglier. Then he said the truest thing he had said in years. The lodge made me feel like no matter what I built, there was a part of your life I couldn't own. And because I had healed enough by then to hear truth without collapsing under it, I answered plainly. That is because love is not ownership, David. And my father understood that before I did. He closed his eyes briefly. I'm sorry. Maybe he meant it. Maybe he was sorry he lost. Sometimes both are true. I looked past him toward the road. The tragedy is not that you betrayed me, I said. The tragedy is that you stood inside something good and still thought the most valuable thing there was what you could take. Then I turned and walked back toward the lodge. He did not call after me. That silence was the first respectful thing he had given me in years. The next rainy season, I restored the staff cottages, expanded ranger partnerships, protected the lower marsh, and launched a community stewardship program through the trust. We created opportunities for local hospitality students who could not afford formal training. My mother's pantry became a small archive of the lodge's history. My father's desk stayed exactly where it had always been. Nuru Ridge did not become bigger. It became truer. People ask me now if I regret locking my husband out. No. I regret every time I explained my pain to the person causing it, as if better wording could produce conscience. I regret every dinner where I swallowed insult to preserve peace that never protected me. I regret every moment I confused endurance with wisdom. But I do not regret the gate. I do not regret the changed codes. I do not regret the legal file. I do not regret the officers arriving. I do not regret making him remove his furniture from land he thought my grief had left undefended. Because boundaries are not cruelty. Sometimes they are the final form of self-respect. Sometimes they are the only language greed understands. And sometimes the most powerful thing a woman can do is stop begging to be chosen inside a home she already built, already protected, already inherited in truth. If someone has been treating your kindness like access, let this be your reminder. Not everyone deserves a key to the softest parts of your life. Not everyone deserves your peace, your labor, your loyalty, your family table, your memories, or the places your parents built for you to feel safe. Some people only understand value after permission is gone. By then, the codes have changed. The gate is shut. And the woman they underestimated is no longer asking anyone to leave. She is simply standing in what is hers. If this story moved you, drop your country in the comments. Tell me the line that hit you hardest, and subscribe for more powerful life stories about betrayal, karma, legacy, and women who choose dignity over fear.